Marina Delgado had always been invisible to her husband, but she didn't realize she'd been erased entirely until the certified letter arrived. It came on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, slipped through the mail slot of the cramped studio apartment she'd been living in for the past 8 months. The return address meant nothing to her. Hartley & Associates, Legal Services. She almost tossed it aside with the grocery store circulars and credit card offers, but something about the weight of it, the expensive paper, the embossed letterhead, made her pause. Marina set down her grocery bags and tore it open standing in the doorway, her keys still dangling from the lock. Dissolution of marriage. Case number 2024, DR 8847. The word swam before her eyes. She read the first paragraph 3 times before the meaning penetrated. This letter serves as notification that the marriage between Marcus James Delgado and Marina Sophia Delgado was legally dissolved on June 12, 2024, in accordance with the laws of June. 4 months ago, while she'd been working double shifts at the diner, sending him texts he never answered, leaving voicemails that went straight to a full mailbox, while she'd been telling herself he just needed space, that their separation was temporary, that 17 years of marriage couldn't just evaporate. Apparently it could. It had. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the attached documents. There was Marcus's signature, bold and confident as ever, right next to a date in early May. And there, in the corner, a line for her own signature. Except it wasn't blank. Someone had signed her name in a cramped, uncertain hand that looked nothing like her own flowing script. Marina sank onto the sagging futon that doubled as her couch, the papers slipping from her fingers and scattering across the worn carpet. She should have been furious. She should have been on the phone with a lawyer, screaming about fraud and forgery. But all she felt was a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. Of course Marcus had done this. Of course he'd found a way to leave without the messiness of actually having to face her, to explain, to acknowledge that she'd wasted nearly 2 decades loving a man who'd apparently stopped seeing her years ago. The apartment pressing around her, 400 square feet of temporary living that had somehow become permanent, the water-stained ceiling, the kitchenette with 2 working burners, the bathroom where the tiles were coming loose and black mold crept along the shower grout no matter how much bleach she used. This was her life now. 52 years old, divorced without her knowledge or consent, working for minimum wage plus tips, sleeping on a futon in a building where her neighbors' arguments bled to the thin walls at all hours. Marina had grown up in a small house in El Paso, the youngest of 4 daughters. Her mother had cleaned houses for wealthy families in the foothills, coming home each evening smelling of pine sol and other people's cooking. Her father had worked construction until the day a scaffold gave way beneath him, leaving him with a limp and a settlement that barely covered the medical bills. They'd scrape by, always, with just enough to keep the lights on and food on the table, but never quite enough for the extras, the school trips, the new clothes, the quinceañera Marina had dreamed but never had. She'd married Marcus when she was 35, later than most of her friends, after she'd already convinced herself that marriage wasn't in the card for her. He'd been charming then, attentive, full of big dreams about the business he was going to start, the life they were going to build together. He worked in medical equipment sales and talked constantly about the deals he was closing, the commissions he was earning, the promotion that was always just around the corner. Marina had been working as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm. Nothing glamorous, but steady work with benefits. She liked the orderliness of it, the way numbers always added up correctly if you were patient enough to find your mistake. When Marcus proposed, she felt something unlock in her chest, a door she kept carefully closed, afraid to hope for too much. The first few years had been good. They'd bought the house on Maple Street, a 3-bedroom ranch with a fenced backyard and a maple tree that blazed orange every fall. Marina had painted the kitchen yellow, had planted rose bushes along the front walk, had set up the 3rd bedroom as a nursery with soft green walls and a white crib that waited, hopeful and empty. She'd gotten pregnant twice. The first time, she lost a baby at 8 weeks. The second time, she made it to 20 weeks before the ultrasound revealed what the doctor gently called incompatible with life. They'd named her Lucia anyway, had held her tiny, perfect body for the few hours she'd lived, had buried her in a plot Marina visited every month with fresh flowers. After Lucia, something had shifted in Marcus, or maybe it had always been there, and Marina had just been too grief-stricken to notice. He started working later hours, going on more business trips, spending weekends playing golf with clients instead of home with her. When she tried to talk about trying again, about adoption, about fostering, he'd wave her off. "We need to focus on financial stability first," he'd say. "My career is at a crucial point." His career. It was always about his career. The promotion that never quite materialized. The business opportunity that required just a little more capital. The investment that was going to change everything. Marina had watched their savings account dwindle as Marcus chased one scheme after another, each one promising to be the answer to all their problems. And she'd said nothing. She'd gone to work every day, had managed their household budget with increasing desperation, had learned to make a chicken last for 5 meals and to shop the clearance racks, and to smile when Marcus brought home another expensive golf club or designer watch because he needed to look successful to be successful. 3 years ago, the accounting firm had downsized. Marina's position had been eliminated, and at 49, she discovered that being a bookkeeper with 20 years of experience made her simultaneously overqualified and too expensive for most positions. She'd cycled through a series of temporary jobs: receptionist, data entry clerk, retail associate, each one paying less than the last. Marcus's response had been to grow colder, more distant. He'd started making comments about her weight, her clothes, her cooking. "You've really let yourself go," he'd said one evening, barely looking up from his phone. "Maybe if you took better care of yourself, you'd have better luck with jobs." She lost 15 pounds after that, had bought new clothes at Goodwill, had dyed the gray out of her hair. It hadn't mattered. Marcus had already checked out of their marriage, though she hadn't wanted to see it. The final blow had come last January. Marcus had sat her down at the kitchen table, the one she'd refinished herself, sanding away years of scratches and stains, and told her he needed space. He was going through something, he said. He needed to find himself. The words had sounded rehearsed, like lines from a script. "I think it would be best if you stayed somewhere else for a while," he'd said, "just temporarily, until I figure things out." "This is my house, too," Marina had said, her voice small. "Actually," Marcus had replied, and she could still hear the satisfaction in his voice, "if you look at the deed, the house is in my name. My credit was better when we bought it, remember? You can stay with your sister, just for a few months." She called him every day for the first week, begging come home, to talk things through. He'd stopped answering after that. She'd driven by the house a few times, had seen his car in the driveway, had noticed that the rose bushes she'd planted were dead, their brown branches skeletal against the siding. Her sister Rosa had let her stay for 2 months, but Rosa's apartment was small and her patience shorter. "You need to move on, Marina," she'd said, not unkindly. "He's not coming back. Find your own place. Start fresh." The studio apartment had been all Marina could afford on her diner wages. It was in a neighborhood where car alarms went off regularly and someone had spray-painted graffiti on the building's front door. But it was hers, or at least she paid rent on it, which was close enough. Now, sitting on her futon with the divorce papers scattered around her, Marina felt the last thread of hope finally snap. She'd been holding on to the fantasy that Marcus would realize his mistake, would come back, would remember the woman he'd married and the life they'd built together. But he'd divorced her. Secretly. Fraudulently. He'd erased their marriage as easily as deleting a file from a computer. Marina pulled herself to her feet and mechanically put away the groceries. Store-brand pasta, wilted lettuce, a carton of eggs with one already cracked. She made herself a cup of instant coffee and sat at the card table that served as her dining room, staring at nothing. Her phone buzzed. A text from Yolanda, her co-worker. "Don't forget to pick up your lottery ticket. Jackpot's at $340 million. Someone's got to win, right?" Marina almost laughed. The lottery? She'd been buying a ticket every week for 3 years now, ever since her mother died and left her exactly $52. "Play my numbers," her mother had whispered from her hospital bed, pressing a torn piece of paper into Marina's hand. They'll come through someday, Mija. I feel it. Her mother had been a superstitious woman, full of old wives' tales and portents. She believed in signs and destiny, in the idea that the universe kept accounts and eventually balanced them. Marina had inherited none of that faith, but she kept playing the numbers anyway. It was the only thing her mother had left her besides a battered rosary and a recipe for tamales. It had become a ritual, a tiny act of rebellion against the universe's cruel logic. $2 a week for hope, however idiotic. She kept playing even after Marcus left. Even after the bills piled up, even after she had to choose between buying the ticket and buying fresh vegetables. She pulled on her jacket, Marcus's old jacket, really, the one he'd left behind because it wasn't expensive enough for his new life, and walked the 3 blocks to the corner store. The evening air smelled like exhaust and someone's dinner cooking, garlic and cumin, making her stomach growl. A group of teenagers clustered outside the liquor store next door, their laughter sharp in the cooling air. A homeless man pushed a shopping cart pile with plastic bags and cardboard signs. Marina nodded at him as she passed. She'd given him her leftover breakfast from the diner last week, and he'd blessed her in a voice roughened by years on the street. She stepped into the fluorescent brightness of Pete's Convenience, nodding at Pete himself behind the bulletproof glass. Pete was a first-generation immigrant from Korea, probably close to 70, who'd run this store for as long as Marina had lived in the neighborhood. He knew all his regulars by name, asked about their families, extended credit when times were tight. "The usual, Marina," he called. "The usual." She pulled out 2 crumpled dollar bills and slid them through the slot, then recited the number she'd memorized 3 years ago. 7, 14, 23, 31, 47, Powerball 9. Her mother's birthday, her father's death date, the day she'd married Marcus, the day her daughter had been born before she'd lost her at 20 weeks, the address of her childhood home. A whole life encoded in 6 numbers. Pete handed her the ticket. "This is the one. I can feel it," he said, like he did every week. "From your lips to God's ears," Marina replied, like she did every week. She walked home in the gathering darkness, the lottery ticket tucked into her pocket, the divorce papers waiting on her table. Somewhere across town, in the house they bought together 20 years ago, the house she'd painted and planted flowers around, and filled with dreams of the family they'd never quite managed to build, Marcus was probably sitting down to dinner with whatever new life he constructed without her. Marina didn't know it yet, but in 72 hours, everything would change, and Marcus would come crawling back. Part 2, Wednesday morning. Marina woke at 5:30 to the sound of her neighbor's alarm bleeding through the wall. She lay in the gray pre-dawn light, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the divorce papers. She should call a lawyer. She should figure out if the fraudulent signature meant the divorce wasn't valid, if she could fight it, if there was any point in fighting it. But what would be the point? Marcus didn't want her. That much was abundantly clear. Fighting to stay married to a man who'd gone to illegal lengths to be rid of her seemed pathetic even by her own diminished standards. She rolled out of bed and went through her morning routine on autopilot. Shower in the cramped bathroom, where the water pressure was barely more than a drizzle. Coffee from the ancient coffee maker she'd bought at a garage sale. Uniform on. The pink polyester dress with Sonny's Diner embroidered over the pocket. Support hose that were supposed to help with the varicose veins, but mostly just made her feet sweat. Sensible white sneakers with gel insoles. The lottery ticket sat on the counter where she'd left it. She picked it up, looked at the numbers, and tucked it into her purse. The drawing was tomorrow night. In 24 hours, this ticket would be worthless, and she'd buy another one, and the cycle would continue. The bus ride to the diner took 40 minutes, long enough for Marina to see the city wake up around her. The professionals in their business clothes, clutching travel mugs and staring at their phones. The construction workers in their high-visibility vests and work boots. The nurses and hospital staff in scrubs, heading home after night shifts. A whole city of people just trying to get by. Just like her, Sonny's Diner occupied a corner lot on a busy street, the kind of place that had been there forever and would probably be there forevermore. The booths had been reupholstered at least a dozen times. The counter stools were held together with duct tape and prayer, and the smell of coffee and bacon grease had soaked into the very walls. The clientele was mostly regulars, construction workers getting breakfast before heading to job sites, elderly folks who came in for the senior discount and conversation, night shift workers stopping in before heading home. Yolanda was already there when Marina arrived, her wild curly hair pulled back in a ponytail, her makeup impeccable as always. Yolanda was 28, a single mother of two, working 2 jobs to keep her kids fed and clothed. She treated the diner like a stage, flirting with the truck drivers and charming the old men into leaving bigger tips. She'd taken Marina under her wing when Marina had started 8 months ago, showing her the ropes and covering for her when grief or exhaustion made Marina's hands shake so badly she couldn't carry a tray. "You get your ticket?" Yolanda asked, tying her apron. "Got it. I bought 5 this time. Figured I'd increase my odds." Yolanda grinned. "When I win, I'm buying a house. Something with a yard for the kids. Maybe a pool." "That sounds nice," Marina said. "What about you? What would you do with $340 million? Marina had never really thought about it. The lottery had never been about actually winning. It had been about the $2 a week of possibility, of hope, of maybe. But now, in the wake of the divorce papers, she let herself imagine it. "I'd get a lawyer," she said slowly. "A good one. I'd make Marcus pay for what he did." Yolanda's expression sobered. "Everything okay, hon?" Marina shook her head. "Found out yesterday that Marcus divorced me. 4 months ago. Forged my signature and everything. That pendejo." Yolanda's eyes flashed. "Are you serious? Can he even do that?" "Apparently he did." "Marina, that's fraud. That's illegal. You need to report him." "I know. I will. I just—" Marina trailed off. What was the point of finishing that sentence? She was tired. She was sad. She didn't have the energy to fight. The morning rush started, and there was no more time for conversation. Marina fell into the rhythm of the work, taking orders, delivering food, refilling coffee cups, clearing tables, running back and forth between the dining room and the kitchen where Ray, the cook, bellowed orders and flipped eggs with practiced efficiency. Her feet hurt. Her back hurt. A trucker at table 6 called her sweetheart, in a tone that made her skin crawl, and a mother at table 3 let her toddler smear syrup all over the booth while she scrolled through her phone. The lunch rush was even worse. A bus tour stopped in. 50 elderly tourists who all wanted separate checks and complained about everything from the temperature of the soup to the speed of the service. By 2 o'clock, when her shift finally ended, Marina felt like she'd been run over by a truck. She counted out her tips in the back room, $47, which was actually pretty good, and changed out of her uniform. "You working tomorrow?" Yolanda asked. Morning shift again. "Let's watch the drawing together tomorrow night. I'm getting off at 6. We can grab a bottle of wine from the liquor store and dream big." Marina smiled despite herself. "Okay, that sounds nice." The bus ride home gave her too much time to think. She pulled out her phone and stared at Marcus's number in her contacts. She should call him. She should scream at him, demand answers, threaten legal action. But she remembered the way his voice had sounded the last time they'd spoken. Cold, dismissive, like she was a stranger who'd gotten his number by mistake. Instead, she called her sister. "Marina, I was just thinking about you. How are you doing?" Rosa's voice was warm, concerned. Rosa was the oldest of the 4 sisters, the one who'd held the family together after her father died, who'd helped put their younger sisters through college, who'd managed to build a comfortable life as a dental hygienist with a husband who actually loved her and 3 grown children who called every week. "Not great," Marina admitted. "I got some papers yesterday. Marcus divorced me. In June. Forged my signature." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "That son of a bitch," Rosa finally said. "Marina, please tell me you're calling a lawyer." "I don't have money for a lawyer. There are legal aid services. Free consultations. You can't let him get away with this." "I know. I will. I just needed to tell someone." "Do you want to come over for dinner? Alberto's making his carnitas." Marina's stomach growled at the thought of Alberto's carnitas, but she shook her head even though Rosa couldn't see it. I can't tonight. I'm exhausted. But thank you. Promise me you'll call a lawyer. Promise me, Marina. I promise. Back at her apartment, Marina heated up a can of soup and ate it standing at the counter, too tired to even sit down. The divorce papers still lay scattered on the floor. She gathered them up, smoothing out the creases, and read through them more carefully this time. The settlement was laughable. Marcus kept the house, the car, his retirement account. Marina got nothing, according to the paperwork. She'd agreed to this division of assets, signed off on it, waived her rights to any claims. Except she hadn't. She'd never seen these papers before yesterday. Marina pulled out her phone and did what she should have done months ago. She Googled legal aid and divorce fraud and forged signature on divorce papers. The search results were both comforting and overwhelming. Forged signatures on divorce documents were indeed illegal. The divorce could potentially be invalidated. She could sue for her share of the marital assets. But it would take time, money, and energy she wasn't sure she had. She bookmarked several legal aid websites and promised herself she'd call them tomorrow, or the next day, or whenever she could summon the strength to relive her humiliation with a stranger. That night, Marina dreamed of numbers. The lottery numbers floated through her consciousness, rearranging themselves into dates and addresses and the prices of things she couldn't afford. She dreamed of her mother, young and healthy, planting flowers in a garden that stretched on forever. She dreamed of Lucia, the daughter she'd held for 3 hours, grown into a teenager with Marina's eyes and Marcus's smile. She woke at 3 a.m. with tears on her face and the certainty that she'd wasted the best years of her life on a man who'd never really seen her at all. Part 3. The Drawing. Thursday dragged by with excruciating slowness. Marina worked the morning shift, her body moving through the familiar motions while her mind spun in circles. During her break, she sat in her car in the parking lot and finally called one of the legal aid numbers she'd found. The woman who answered was kind but blunt. Yes, forging a signature on divorce documents was fraud. Yes, Marina could potentially have a divorce invalidated, but it would require filing motions, appearing in court, possibly hiring a private attorney if the case became complicated. It could take months or even years. And there was no guarantee she'd be awarded any significant share of the marital assets, especially since she'd been out of the house for 8 months and hadn't contributed financially to the mortgage during that time. But I was contributing for 17 years, Marina protested. I worked. I paid bills. It's not my fault he kicked me out and then divorced me without my knowledge. I understand, Ms. Delgado, and you may very well have a case. But I want to be honest with you about what you're facing. This isn't going to be easy or quick. Marina thanked her and hung up, feeling more defeated than ever. She'd known it wouldn't be simple, but having it spelled out so starkly made her want to give up before she'd even started. By the time her shift ended at 2, her resolve had crumbled. What was the point? Marcus clearly wanted nothing to do with her. Fighting him would just mean more months or years of having him in her life, of reliving the rejection and humiliation. Maybe it would be better to just let it go, to accept that 17 years of marriage had earned her nothing but a cramped apartment and a broken heart. She met Yolanda at 6:30, after Yolanda's second job ended. They walked to the liquor store together, bought a bottle of cheap Moscato, and headed to Yolanda's apartment, a 2-bedroom unit in a complex that was only marginally nicer than Marina's building. Yolanda's kids were with their father for the night, so the apartment was blessedly quiet. They settled on the couch with plastic cups of wine, the TV tuned to the channel that would broadcast a lottery drawing at 8. Okay, Yolanda said, pulling out her 5 tickets and spreading them on the coffee table. Tell me what you'd really do if you won. And don't say, hire a lawyer. Think bigger. $340 million. Marina, that's never work again money. That's tell everyone who ever hurt you to go to hell money. Marina sipped her wine, letting herself imagine it. I'd buy a house. Nothing huge, just something with a garden and a real kitchen. Somewhere quiet. Boring, Yolanda declared. Next, I'd travel. I've never been anywhere. I'd go to Italy, Spain, see where my family came from. Better. What else? Marina paused, surprised by the thought that came next. I go back to school. I always wanted to study literature, maybe teach, but there was never time or money. Yolanda raised her cup. Now we're talking. You'd be a great teacher. You're patient and smart, and you actually listen when people talk. Marina felt herself flush with unexpected pleasure. When was the last time someone had said something genuinely kind to her? They watched bad reality TV and drank their wine and laughed at Yolanda's imitation of the truck driver who'd come into the diner that morning and tried to convince her to join him on the road. By the time 8 o'clock rolled around, Marina felt lighter than she had in days. The lottery broadcast was hosted by a woman with impossibly white teeth and an evening gown that probably cost more than Marina's car. She chattered brightly about previous winners and the charities that benefited from lottery sales while the ping-pong balls bounced in their clear chamber. "Here we go," Yolanda said, squeezing Marina's hand. The first number popped up. 7. Marina's heart skipped. That was her first number. Her mother's birthday, July 7th. Come on," Yolanda muttered, clutching her tickets. The second number. 14. Marina's hand tightened around her wine cup. That was her second number. Valentine's Day, the day her father had died, gasping for breath in a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and defeat. "Holy shit," Yolanda breathed. "Marina, what are your numbers?" Marina couldn't answer. Her throat had closed up. She watched the third ball rise through the chamber. The day she'd married Marcus. The day she stood in a simple white dress in the courthouse, her heart full of hope and dreams, while Marcus slipped a gold band on her finger and promised to love her in sickness and health, for better or worse. "Marina," Yolanda grabbed her arm. "What are your numbers?" Marina pulled the ticket from her purse with shaking hands. She couldn't look at it, couldn't look at the screen, couldn't breathe. The fourth number. 31. January 31st. The day she'd gone into labor at 20 weeks, had felt her daughter slip into the world too soon, too small, already dying. The day she'd named her Lucia, a light, in the hope that even a brief life could shine. "Oh my God," Yolanda whispered. "Oh my God, Marina, all your numbers are coming up." The fifth number seemed to take forever. Marina's vision tunneled, the edges going gray. She felt like she might pass out. Her childhood address. 47, Alameda Street, the little house with a chain-link fence and a pecan tree in the backyard, where she'd spent hot summers reading library books in its shade. The Powerball, the host announced with her brilliant smile. "The Powerball number is..." The red ball rose slowly through the chamber. Marina's cup fell from her hand, wine splashing across Yolanda's carpet. The ticket slipped from her fingers. Yolanda snatched it up, her hand shaking as badly as Marina's. She looked at the ticket, at the screen, at the ticket again. Her mouth opened and closed without sound. "Yoli!" Marina's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Yoli, please tell me." "You won." Yolanda breathed. "Marina, you won. You hit all 6 numbers. You won the lottery." The room tilted sideways. Marina felt Yolanda's hands on her shoulders, heard her friend's voice as if from a great distance. "Marina, stay with me. Breathe. You just won $340 million. You need to breathe." Marina sucked in air, her lungs burning. She looked at the TV screen, where her numbers were displayed in a neat row. 7, 14, 23, 31, 47, Powerball 9. The same numbers had been written on the piece of paper her mother had pressed into her hand 3 years ago. Her mother who cleaned houses her whole life and died with $52 to her name. "Oh, Mama," Marina whispered, and burst into tears. Yolanda wrapped her arms around her and let her cry, rocking her gently while the TV host announced that there was one jackpot winner and speculated about who the lucky person might be and what they might do with their newfound fortune. When Marina finally stopped crying, her face felt swollen and her head ached. But something else had shifted too. A door had opened inside her, one she hadn't even known was there. "What do I do?" she asked Yolanda. "What do I do now?" Yolanda picked up the ticket carefully, treating it like the precious thing it was. "First, you sign the back of this. Right now. Then you put it somewhere safe, a safety deposit box at a bank. Then tomorrow, You call the lottery office and start the process of claiming your prize. And Marina? Yolanda's voice turned fierce. You don't tell anyone. Not yet. Not until you have lawyers and financial advisors and everything set up. People get crazy when this much money is involved. Marina nodded, her mind whirling. $340 million. Even after taxes, that would be, what, over $100 million? She couldn't even conceptualize numbers that large. Can I borrow a pen? She asked. Yolanda handed her one, and Marina signed the back of the ticket with careful, deliberate strokes. Her name had never looked more important. They put the ticket in an envelope, and Yolanda drove Marina to a 24-hour branch of National Bank, where Marina opened a safety deposit box and locked the ticket inside. The whole process felt surreal, like she was watching herself from outside her body. Back at Yolanda's apartment, they sat up until 3 a.m, drinking coffee now instead of wine, planning. Yolanda made Marina promise not to quit her job yet, not to change her routine, not to do anything that would signal to anyone that something had changed. You need time, Yolanda said. Time to process this. Time to set everything up right. You rush into this and people will take advantage. Relatives you haven't talked to in years will come out of the woodwork. Everyone will want a piece. Marcus, Marina said suddenly, what about that Cabron? If he finds out, he'll come back. He'll say the divorce wasn't valid because of the forged signature. He'll claim he deserves half. Yolanda's expression turned calculating. How much does he know about your mother's lottery numbers? Nothing. I never told him. He thought playing a lottery was stupid, a waste of money. Good. Then he won't make the connection right away. But Marina, you need to get that divorce solidified for real and fast. Before you claim the money. Before he finds out. Marina's mind raced. Yolanda was right. She needed to legitimize the divorce. Needed to make absolutely certain that Marcus had no legal claim to her winnings. The irony was almost too perfect. Marcus had divorced her fraudulently to cut her out of his life. And now that fraud was going to ensure he had no access to her fortune. I'll call that legal aid number again tomorrow, Marina said. I'll tell him I want to move forward with validating the divorce, but that I need it done quickly. Don't tell them why, Yolanda warned. Not yet. You can't trust anyone until you have everything locked down. Marina nodded. She understood. $340 million changed everything, including whom you could trust. When Yolanda finally dropped her off at her apartment as the sun was beginning to rise, Marina stood for a moment on the cracked sidewalk, looking up at the building where she'd been living for 8 months. The peeling paint, the broken window on the second floor that someone had covered with cardboard, the stained concrete steps. In a few weeks or months, she'd never have to see this place again. But for now, she climbed the stairs to her apartment, unlocked the door, and stepped into the 400 square feet that still contained all her worldly possessions. The divorce papers still sat on the card table. She picked them up, looking at Marcus's bold signature, at the forged signature that was supposed to be hers. Thank you, she whispered to those fraudulent papers. Thank you for making this clean. Then she lay down on her futon and fell into the first peaceful sleep she'd had in months, while somewhere across town, Marcus Delgado had no idea that the woman he'd thrown away like garbage had just become one of the richest people in the state. Part 4. The Calm Before. Marina woke up on Friday morning, convinced it had all been a dream. She lay still for a long moment, staring at the water-stained ceiling, afraid to move, afraid to check. Then she reached for her phone and pulled up the lottery website. There it was. The winning numbers, 7, 14, 23, 31, 47, Powerball 9. One jackpot winner. Tickets sold at Pete's Convenience on Alameda Street. Her heart started racing again. It was real. She'd won. She'd actually won. The apartment felt different now, as if the walls themselves knew everything had changed. Marina got up and went through her morning routine in a daze, showering and dressing for work automatically, while her mind spun with possibilities and fears. She had to act normal. That was the most important thing. If she suddenly quit her job or started spending money she shouldn't have, people would ask questions, word would spread, and eventually it would reach Marcus. At the diner, Yolanda caught her eye and gave her a small, significant nod. They'd agreed not to talk about it, where anyone could overhear. Marina threw herself into her work, taking orders and delivering food and refilling coffee cups, while inside her head she was already somewhere else entirely. During her break, she sat in her car and called the legal aid office again. The same woman answered. "Ms. Delgado, I'm glad you called back. Have you decided to move forward with contesting the divorce?" "Actually," Marina said carefully, "I've been thinking about it, and I've decided I want the divorce to be final. I just want to make sure it's done correctly, legally, with my actual signature. I don't want there to be any question about it later." There was a pause. "So you want to validate the divorce rather than contest it?" "Yes." "Can I do that?" "You can. You'd essentially be agreeing to the terms after the fact." "But Ms. Delgado, I have to advise you that the settlement isn't fair. You're entitled to—" "I don't care about the settlement," Marina interrupted. "I just want the divorce to be final and legal. How quickly can that happen?" Another pause, longer this time. "If you're both in agreement and willing."